Hey, we're back. Paul Gale Network here again. And the last thing that we were talking about was Xbox One and PlayStation 4 going into Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5. Which system are you more hyped for right now? You know? Um, Too little is known to honestly give a real case of evidence going forward as to which one's going to be better. But right now, knowing what you know, what are you looking forward to more? Uh, the tried and true Xbox One like controller with the Xbox Series X, you know, similar feeling, a little bit better battery life, swappable AA batteries or lithium ion rechargeable battery pack that you could stick in? Or do you like the new take that Sony is doing with the PlayStation 5 controller and the hopes of haptic feedback being a thing for you, especially if you were a fan of HD Rumble and wanted to see what's the next step, kind of being willing to pay for pricier controllers, possibly, and with the controller feeling different than the PlayStation library before it? Are you more of a fan of, Xbox Series X out of the box having a full terabyte of savable space to save your games and files, or are you okay with PlayStation 5's 833 gigabytes of storage space? Do you like the fact that Xbox Series X has more raw teraflops to work with? Or do you like PlayStation 5's greater SSD capable GPU for a faster system? Does RAM matter for you in either one? You know, is backwards compatibility a big issue for you, whether one has it or not, which it looks like Xbox is the one that has more of it? On the surface, that's kind of all you know. But you could dive in a little bit deeper because at least right now we do know that, all right, PlayStation 5 will have some exclusive games built for it come fall. Xbox won't have any first party exclusives for it until a couple of years from now. Third parties on Xbox are being required to develop games for both Xbox One and the Series X for the first couple of years. PlayStation, we might see exclusives. So early out of the gate, even though I think the Xbox Series X will be the more capable system overall, with the exception of that greater SSD power coming out of the PS5, I think PS5's got the greater chance of having bigger hits out of the box this fall when the two go head to head, and for the first couple of years, exclusive wise. That might not be the case though, or maybe it won't be that big of an issue. Xbox studios, they still might have a strong launch, and depending on how much they're able to squeeze out of the games, they still could be very viable. For instance, the new Halo game coming out, it's going to be a big deal come November, December when the Xbox Series X comes out. But what could it have been if it didn't also have to come out on Xbox One, So let's say hypothetically we've got a very beautiful, polished, pristine running new Halo Infinite versus a very polished, beautiful looking Horizon Zero Dawn 2. Halo works in Microsoft's favor because it's a long running franchise, but it's held back a little bit by the fact that it also has to work for Xbox One. But at the same time, you could argue that the majority of the specs on the Xbox Series X are better than PS5's versus Horizon Zero Dawn 2. Smaller of a franchise, it's only one series, one game deep so far. This would be the sequel, but not being held back at all by PS4 and just really being able to shine and showcase what the system could do. And even though teraflop, RAM, overall storage space on the hard drive, which doesn't really take into consideration importance of gameplay, being less than the Xbox Series X, you have to look and see, well, what does a non-hindered game like that do to showcase the system, plus the greater SSD speed? Can it be a bigger, better looking game, loading faster, feeling truly next gen, not just in looks, but in size and scope and CPU intelligence and whatnot, than Halo Infinite? I don't know. Like, where do you stand though? And for that matter, for the next 2 years, it doesn't mean that you won't see a new Perfect Dark, right? Perfect Dark, for all we know, could come out November 2021. It could come out for Xbox Series X and Xbox One, running on Xbox One, Xbox One S, and Xbox One X, right? On all 4 of those systems in that Xbox One to Series X family. And Perfect Dark could look stellar, but could it be as big and as awesome of a game as it would be if it didn't also have to run on Xbox One? That's what I'm a little bit worried of. But I don't think that Microsoft's going to put too much big investment in games until, this development time now passes and we get into November 2022 territory. And then you're going to see, I think, okay, the next Gears of War, the next Perfect Dark, the next Killer Instinct, maybe Conquer coming back, other stuff built exclusively for the system. Whereas Sony, early on, will have some of those true next-gen games as they kind of ditch the PS4. Because like I said in the first part of this video, I just don't see Spider-Man 2 coming out on both. Now it might be, they might see that it is worth it, and maybe they'll even find a way to truly go next gen and not let the PS4 hold the PS5 version back of Spider-Man 2. But then that would also mean probably releasing a crappy version of Spider-Man 2 on PS4. And I know that they also don't want to do that. So, I'm kind of tossed between the two and seeing what's the better strategy. Like, long run, I think the Xbox Series X may be the better platform, but the other part of me says, well, long run, the opposite may be the case as people really start taking advantage of, wow, this PS5 SSD is really quick, and as we're now starting to develop the technology to fully take advantage of it, it's more prominent of a difference ahead of Xbox Series X than we thought. Now the games are starting to look better on this system. I don't know. It's like a HD twin war all over again with 360 versus PS3 in terms of ease of development. Overall, they're going to be similar platforms. It's really going to come down to exclusives. You know what you're getting on both platforms. Xbox, if they really wanted to take advantage of it, they would be working on that Rare IP. If they don't feel confident that the Rare that works at Microsoft now can fully, with their team, create breathtaking games in each of their existing franchises, then they license out to competent developers of like, you take care of a new Perfect Dark. You give us a new Jet Force Gemini. You do the new Conquer. You do the Battletoads. You do the Blast Corps. Okay, now you're starting to look at some cool franchises that are varied. You're having some platformers. You're having Banjo-Kazooie. You've got your first-person shooter, unless if you change up the Joanna Dark formula and to make it a third-person stealth game. That could be their next Metal Gear Solid type game, but it would be exclusive to the Xbox series of systems. You've got your Gears of War and your Halo and your Forza. So Microsoft has a library to work with, especially if they dig into the Rare catalog. But will they do it? I don't know. I think they have to, because I think that was the problem that a lot of people saw when it came to Xbox One versus PlayStation 4, is that PS4 had more of those internal studios, first-party developed titles. You're getting at the time, Spider-Man wasn't inherently a Sony exclusive IP, but now since Insomniac was purchased by Sony for a good amount of dough, Spider-Man 2 will definitely only be a PS5 title. But they had new IP like Horizon. They had, at this point, an established 3 series deep Uncharted trilogy, and even more if you include the portable games. They don't touch Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper much, but they're still in the backlog. They kind of use Ratchet and Clank a little more, especially since the reboot got done on PS4, whereas the other franchises haven't been seen as much lately. And of course, Sony has God of War, and they have their own Gran Turismo. So you start to stack the piles up, and depending on if both companies use their franchises to the fullest, you could get a really good generation right now. And if these past gens have been lasting 7 years, this one could last, especially if they do a mid-gen refresh, could be like an 8 or 9 year generation. I don't know. We'll see how creative and how early on into this cycle do developers really max out these machines, Like, are we going to see from Ubisoft a Beyond Good and Evil 2, like, now we've got the hardware that we could really not be limited and do what we want to do. Now we're going to see Rockstar with Grand Theft Auto 6, and this thing is just mind-blowingly big and awesome, detailed, and so many man and woman hours into this project. Such a big, budget title that, like, wow. Yeah, we're not going to need any new hardware for a long time to come. Not to say this is going to be the last gen. I don't think that'll ever be a last generation. Even with the law of diminishing returns, the video game industry has always proven that it is continuously evolving. Whether it's from a graphical standpoint, a technological standpoint, shifting into new ways of play with motion gaming, with 3D gaming, both literally off the 3DS screen, dual screen gaming, virtual reality headset gaming. I'm not blind to say we're always going to get these next big true revolutions, because that doesn't happen. A revolution happens, once in a while, not every 5 years. It takes a lot longer, to happen. But I'm also not too naive to say that, one day we probably won't get some kind of, holographic gaming setup where you've got, pillars in several corners, 4 corners, 8 corners, whatever, and you have a canvas and lights, and, there's 3D activity being presented in front of you. Could that happen? One moment. Yes?
I need some ice water.
You need some ice water? Okay, 1 second. This is real life coming at you with ice water. 1 moment. Okay. Here you go. And we're back. So that's real life with real life interruptions, but that's okay. Let's see if I can think back. What was I saying just a second ago? Real 3D life, holographic gaming. Technology has advanced so much in the last 30-ish years of gaming and of life in general that could we see, like I said earlier, four pillars going on, right? Canvas in between, or 8 pillars, light bouncing off special things, boom, 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 and like here in front of you now is, think of the first time you saw 3D gaming and how simple it was now, but how mind-blowing it was then. I'll never forget Super Mario 64. Playing it for the first time. Phenomenal experience. As a kid who grew up, born in '83, and then now 13 years later, being a gamer from the age of 4, probably from like 1987. So 9 years of dedicated gaming, almost a decade or so, and playing left to right or up and down around a 3D map, and then Super Mario 64, this 3D polygonal move around the environment, changing the camera angle around you, whatever which way. Yeah, wahoo! Jumping around. Amazing experience. The biggest shift that gaming has ever had. That was a revolution. And let's say the first, holographic gaming experiences. Let's take Super Mario 64, something basic. You're having this area in front of you, and maybe it's a 16 square foot zone, right? 4 by 4, and that's kind of it. And you're able to rotate the camera angle, which as you're sitting in one position, this world, like picture Super Mario 64's very first stage. Not Princess Peach's castle, but where you first encounter the Bob-ombs and you fight, the Bob-omb King on top of, the giant platform in the middle, and you interact with the cannons and so forth, the ride the turtle shell, see Chain Chomp, that zone. You're going into this first world, and now in front of you is, not as vibrant of a color of what we're getting in today's 4K 60 frames per second high fidelity games running on PC. No, but a cleaned, polished up version. Think of something along the lines of, Super Mario Odyssey visual fidelity, size and scope a little bit bigger than Super Mario 64, but that's the first holographic gaming. So it's a step back in visual fidelity, but it's 5 steps forward, 10 steps forward, and like, oh my gosh, wow, they're moving toys bouncing around on your living room floor. The light and the trickery behind it is so phenomenal that you're seeing objects move, and you could come up close to it and look around and play, and if someone's sitting on the other side, they're not seeing what you're seeing. They're seeing the different area, the different part of the world unfold with cannons going by this way, that way. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, when I say the next revolution in gaming, that's why I think there will never be a last game console, because that example, I think, will one day happen. I'm not, skeptical to say that that's never going to happen. I'm not naive and saying, oh, it's going to happen tomorrow, but one day it'll go down. When you're playing GoldenEye 007 for the first time back in 1997, for as awesome of a first-person shooter as that game was, did you think that 9-10 years later, the Nintendo Revolution, which ended up being Wii, would have motion controls, where one of the most popular games of the next couple of years was Wii Sports, hitting a tennis racket around? And even if you're going more precise than that, Metroid Prime 3, Corruption. 2 hands apart from one another, one hand interlocking, going in and out, aiming around, firing, grapple hook, satisfying feeling, motion control gaming. You can't really see how things are going to go in this industry. So that's why I'm always open to anything. When the DS came out in 2004, 2004? Yeah, the first DS came out in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. Geez, it's been a while. That was the precursor to smartphones. Did it have a direct impact in companies being like, touchscreen gaming, touchscreen access, that's the way of the future? Maybe, maybe not, but probably to an extent, And look at, everyone's got a smartphone these days, whether it's an iPhone, an Android, Samsung, whatever you've got, smartphone, not just for gaming, but just smartphone with a screen, accessible touchscreen technology. That's here to stay until what happens next,
Daddy?
And with motion control gaming, it's different than it was with Wii, with the Wii Remote and the Nunchuck, but some of that is still done with Splatoon, for instance, how you're aiming around on screen with gyro, right? Uh, play Doom on Nintendo Switch, and it's really quite cool to move around and not just dual analog stick aim and shoot, but to use precise hand movements. That's as precise as you could get, compared to a mouse and keyboard or even the Wii remote with pointing around. So there's always things that are going to go forward. You put on VR for the first time, and depending on your VR experience, if it's a simple game or if it's something that, like, wow, you don't see anything around you, like any of the black screen, you're just in this world, VR gaming is going to get better. People think that Resident Evil 7 is awesome. Don't worry, the VR setup is only going to get more impressive as time goes on. Yeah. And some people like to call that a revolution, and some people don't consider it a revolution yet. But something will be the next revolution, we'll get holographic gaming. We'll get something down the road. But what about just, you're not interested in that. I'm not interested in holographic gaming, and I'm not interested in motion controls. I just want to see better graphics. Will that happen? I also think so, but in that case, that's truly where the law of diminishing returns comes into effect. Going from 480i, 480p to 720p, a big difference in visual clarity. Going up to 1080p, all right, at that point, things are looking crisp, things are looking clear. Going into 4K, once again, how clear are you going to get? Are hardware manufacturers going to push for 8K, for 16K? Or are they going to be satisfied with, all right, just stick to 1080p, just stick to 4K, make all the games 60 frames per second. How about let's have that? And let's make the visual fidelity just outstanding. Let's make the CPU and the comprehension of what the game could do so dynamic, so big, so bold, so textured. At what point is it going to end? So I think, unless if you have companies continuously evolving the type of play, you're probably going to finally reach a point where there's very little change for the next generation in terms of graphics power, but something else will happen. Something else will be that shift. So I don't know. I love video games. I love talking about games. That was a pretty big discussion on Xbox versus PlayStation. And then we have Nintendo, which I talked a fair amount in the beginning of this video, in video part 1 in particular. What's Nintendo going to do going forward? There was a while where Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Nintendo GameCube had the best looking games per generation. Specifically Nintendo's first party studios, Nintendo's artists, they really knew how to maximize hardware. And other people too, like Factor 5 always did a great job. Retro Studios continues to do a good job. Rare did a great job back in the day. But what's Nintendo going to do next? Do I think that we would have seen a new Nintendo console at E3 this year? I don't think so, but could there have been a video tease of what's to come next year? Maybe, but maybe that's too early because maybe they want to continue to maximize sales of the Nintendo Switch and don't want people to slow down on buying Switch because, if I just wait, 7 months, I could get Switch Plus. So perhaps no new hardware would be shown, but it still makes you ask the question, what's next for them hardware-wise? Will we ever see a dedicated Nintendo console, a new powerhouse, whether it's an advanced 4K capable running machine, Blu-ray plus high capacity disc, proprietary disc, high capacity cartridge, downloadable, whatever it is, but that big bad 16 gigs of RAM, 16 teraflop beast of a machine that's neck and neck, plus or minus a little bit of what the competition has for that generation, or not? Or will Nintendo always be, on the technical aspect, a little bit behind per gen? That's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, if anyone's going to make holographic gaming, probably Nintendo is going to be the one that starts that off, Um, or does Nintendo continue changing the game by adding more things that people didn't think of yet? Motion controls, touchscreen gaming, uh, what have you. Right now with the Nintendo Switch, I like what they're doing. It's very solid. It's a really powerful, cool portable that works just fine on the TV, provides the majority of the games that are capable of running on other systems on it, some to better degree than others. Does Nintendo decide to wait and have no Plus model come out at all, and just wait a good 3-4 years? Okay, so they've got a 2023 March to March 2024 at the latest, I think, of a new system, the Nintendo Switch 2. And it's the same thing. It's a new dock, play it on TV, it's a better kickstand, new and improved Joy-Cons, Joy-Con Plus, the old ones still work, higher quality screen. But at this point, it's releasing, 6 to 7 years after the Nintendo Switch, but only 3 to 4 years after PS5, Xbox Series X. So it is capable of the vast majority of the PS5, Xbox Series X games, but to a lesser degree visually in a handheld. Could that be Nintendo's strategy? So you will eventually see all of the beautiful games, because I think Nintendo does have the best catalog of software, of unique IP, the big powerhouse games that have made the company iconic, with Mario, Zelda, to an extent, Pokemon, Donkey Kong, Metroid, Star Fox if they use it properly. Things that we haven't seen for a while like F-Zero, Wave Race, Punch-Out, and then we've got Kirby and Yoshi, and of course Mario Kart and Smash Bros. And now Splatoon and ARMS and what it could do going forward, and Pikmin. That's a lot. There's definitely more in the Nintendo camp than exclusively in Xbox and PlayStation. Now, whether you're a fan of them or not, that's kind of debatable, but I think it's hard to argue against giving Nintendo proper credit for establishing some power franchises and consistently introducing new genres, new playstyles, new methods of play, new games, different genres, fulfilling the need in many of them for the last 30 plus years, right? So we all see, wow, that's what blank game looks like on blank system. I would love to see my Mario look like that. I would love to see my Zelda look like that. You eventually get it, but you get it a generation later. In the meantime, you still get progressively more and more beautiful games, just perhaps not looking as strong from just a visual technical standpoint as the competition, but still great in their own right. Like, Luigi's Mansion 3 versus Ratchet and Clank Reboot. Both very good looking games, both run at a high resolution, both have good art styles, both have high polygon count. I think Luigi's Mansion 3 is better than Ratchet and Clank Reboot. I think both look beautiful from a technical perspective. You'd have to do some real looking and say, okay, which one runs at a higher frame rate, which one's clocked in at a higher resolution, which one truly has the better looking environments from a polygonal standpoint with more shine, more texture work and stuff like that. But neither one looks bad. They have different art styles, and I would say that I like the look of Luigi's Mansion 3 enough to call it the better looking game. Technical standpoint, that might be different. Ratchet and Clank may get its own more powerful hardware, but it's still fine. So I think we're getting a good amount of Nintendo content. I think we're getting a good amount of hardware improvising out of them and visual fidelity advancement that I think Nintendo's going to be fine by. Just wonder, what are they going to do going forward, I think that's enough of a talk for day one. I didn't share too many stories from E3 past, but I plan to do more in the coming days and share some more. So if you're watching this long, part 1 and part 2 on day 1, thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks for bearing with the little interruption once in a while. But for now, PGN signing out. Thank you for watching again. Hope you all have a good day, and let's cross our fingers that we get some cool, unexpected announcements to roll off in these next couple of days, and then I will put them together as my feedback roll in this unofficial E3 2020 series of videos. Have a good one. Bye.